Hi, my name is Shelby Redfield Kilgore, and I am a Korean adoptee and the filmmaker of all these foster care and adoption films on this YouTube channel. I also have been sharing openly about my breast cancer journey during the pandemic, and I have found so many different parallels between my adoption journey and my cancer journey when it comes to loss, grief, and trauma. Today on Adoption Education, I'm going to be answering the question along with another adoptee, why is it important to watch adoption films? I think my work since 2012 of all of my films about foster care and adoption speaks for itself. I think watching films about adoption, and certainly films created by adoptees, is important for everyone impacted by adoption to watch. Watching adoption films, listening to adoptee stories is really important to understand the nuances in adoption. And on today's episode, I'm featuring an adoptee, David Bynum, and he is also a filmmaker, a writer, producer, director, and he decided to document his journey to search for his first family. And his documentary is called From a Place of Love, My Adoption Journey. And I think this film is amazing for adoptees looking to search for adoptive parents and how they can help support their child or their adopted child who is now an adult in their search. And also for first parents, a first mother who relinquished her child for adoption, that they may see what adoptees are feeling or going through. And also why I think it's important for adoptees to watch that may be thinking about searching but not quite taking the steps, is this film is a great look into what that search looks like, what the reunion looks like, what kind of emotions or feelings may surface from the beginning until the end. But I think there are definitely similarities and commonalities between all of us that most of us may face or deal with, and there is a lot of strength in hearing other adoptees' stories and what they're going through, because it may help with your own journey and recognizing your own feelings and where they come from. I recommend that anyone indirectly or directly impacted by adoption watch this film. It is a story of self-discovery. It is a story of finding one's roots. And without further ado, I will let David Bynum take it away.
Hi, my name is David Bynum. I'm currently the president of Bydam Multimedia. I'm married to a wonderful woman, Marie Damus. I'm the father of 3, grandfather of 6. I was adopted at birth in 1959 through an arranged adoption. Came home straight from the hospital to my adoptive parents. My mother sat me down to tell me that I was adopted and explain what adoption meant as soon as I was old enough to understand. I'd venture to say I was 5 or 6 years old. And I think it took me a while to process what it truly meant. My mother was a young white woman who was a college student and really didn't have the resources to take care of me. And also that my father was a young black student that played football for Ohio State at the time. Later we found out it was Bowling Green University. But I had always grown up knowing that I came from a white mother and a black father, and that the racial dynamic played a big part in my adoption back in the 50s. But I felt so much love and cared for that adoption never really was a big issue in our home. Matter of fact, we only spoke about it twice. My childhood was very normal. I was an only child, and both of my parents were well-to-do. Money wasn't an issue, and basically, for lack of a better word, I was spoiled. Any and everything that I could want or need was provided for most of the time before I knew I wanted or needed it. My childhood was very normal. I thought everybody's childhood was the same. My dad was a small business owner of a used car lot, so the majority of his focus, the majority of his time was running his business. So the majority of the time that I spent with him was up on the lot, the car lot, working with him, doing that. Then we also took family vacations and taught me to fish, taught me to do all the things that a dad teaches his son to do. And my mother, the best way to describe it is she was my best friend. I felt that I could talk to her about anything. She was my biggest fan. She was my biggest support system and also my best friend. So she was probably the closest person that I was with on the face of this earth. My life was so regular that adoption really didn't play a major focus. So we really didn't have the need to talk about adoption. It may have came up if something was on TV or something like that, but never as an issue, or never was I made to feel a certain way because I was adopted. I think the one thing that most adoptees carry with us is the not knowing and the wondering. So at times I wondered who my natural parents were, what they were like, the type of people they were. Were they famous? Were they poor? Were they this? Were they that? You play the scenarios over 1,000,000 times in your mind, and you have a tendency to write a fantasy story in your mind about what they may be like. When I did have those thoughts, they were fleeting. They left as quick as they came. So I wasn't angry. I wasn't feeling like I was missing anything. I always kind of knew who I was because I was adopted by 2 black parents. My mother was very fair-skinned like I was, so there was never anything about me not looking like them or not looking like I didn't fit in or not feeling like I didn't belong. All the rest of my family always accepted me that way. It was never discussed. I was never made to feel any other way. So I really didn't have any identity problems. I think growing up in the 70s, I wanted to prove my blackness. So I grew my afro and wore the clothes and talked the lingo and all of that. So if there was any identity things, it was me establishing what was already just taken for granted, and me just being a part of that era, growing up in the 70s, the 60s and the 70s. So there wasn't so much an identity crisis about who I was, but about just being part of the times, fitting in with the times more or less than trying to establish who and what I was. I feel that it's important for people to watch adoption films just to get a different perspective. Even though most adoptees have the central theme of wanting to know where they came from, who they truly are, what their roots are, I think we all share that. I think it's very important that people get different perspectives because even though most of our stories carry the same theme, they're different. So it gives you a different perspective on adoption. Since I've been on my journey, I've learned so much more about adoption and the different facets of it. So seeing as many films, as many documentaries, as many programs as possible, I think gives people a broader perspective of adoption, which is always good. Knowledge is power. So before I made my movie, I happened to watch Angela Tucker's movie, Closure. And even though the stories were different, the way she was raised by a transracial family and all the things she went through, her journey intrigued me. And it was told more from her family's perspective than her perspective. But it gave me the ideal of doing mine, but telling it in the form that I told it in, from my perspective, aided by the people that helped me with my journey. I didn't document it as it was developing. As it was developing, I kind of wanted it to be more of a private thing because for 58 years, I had a chance to prepare myself. My siblings, which didn't know anything about the adoption, only had the 2 to 3 years, that I showed up. So as the story started to unfold, people were saying, hey, you need to write a book, you need to do this. And since we already had a production company and a background, we decided to do it ourselves. So we kind of documented after the fact, after the search, after the reunion, after things were established, is when we proceeded and just kind of went back and talked to everybody. Although I did journal through the documentary, so that helped me write the script from my journal. We kind of felt that it could be helpful to others, because when I sat down to start my journey, I didn't have a clue how to look, where to look, what to do. So I just sat down and Googled, how do you find your biological family? And came up with the Adoption Network Cleveland, reached out to them, and that's how things took off. We made this kind of with the hope that it gives people a roadmap, so to speak, or a starting point, or the courage to do it. Because I think the biggest thing my mother told me in 1999 was our second talk about if I wanted to look, it was okay. So I think just planting that seed, it grew, and it took me 17 years after we had that talk to look. And I think that was me preparing myself for this, because this is one of the most emotional things that anyone will ever do in their lives. Because not only is it going to change your life, it's going to change the people around you's lives. Whether it's your immediate family, whether it's your new biological family, people's lives will be changed. So you have to be prepared for any and everything. I've described it as opening Pandora's box. You don't know what you're going to find. But you do know that ultimately there's the possibility of you being rejected, or there's a possibility of you being welcomed with open arms, and everything in between that. The whole journey itself gave me closure. As I saw the age of 60 on the horizon, I began my journey at 58. I figured if I was ever going to find out where I truly came from, where my roots was, who I was, it was going to be now or never. Because the parents were getting older, people would start to die just through age. So it gave me the closure that I was seeking. It also gave me the medical history that I began to learn, which I was able to give my biological child. So it just really, really helped close an open-end question that I think all adoptees carry with us our whole life until we find out, those that are able to. I hope this film meets people at their needs, that you watch this film and are able to take away from it whatever it is you may be needing at that time. Whether it's a push to start your own search, whether it's what it takes to do it, whether it's the contact point to start, or whether it's how to prepare yourself mentally, physically, and emotionally. The main thing that I would suggest that people do if you are planning or thinking or considering your own journey, whether it be a birth parent looking for a child, whether it's a child looking for the birth parent, whether it's an adoptive parent trying to help the birth child, is to read as much as you can read, talk to as many people as you can talk to who have experienced what you're about to do, watch as many films, documentaries, shows, try to do the research and talk to folks that have been through it, because no two journeys are the same. My advice to adoptive parents would be to be supportive and understand that your child may not be looking because of what you did or did not provide them, but just out of the curiosity of wanting to know who they truly are, who their background is, what their roots are, where they came from. Even though that was how I felt, the values that I carry today, that I've taught my children and that I'm teaching my grandchildren, all came from my parents, from my adoptive parents. The way that I was raised, the way that I grew up, the things that I was taught. So just understand the things that you've taught your child are where their base is. So I would not feel, and it's easier said than done because you're dealing with emotions, but be supportive as possible and don't take it personal as if you did or didn't do something in the raising of that child. Just understand they have questions that they want answered, and it really has nothing to do with you being a good or bad parent, but it's just something that we as adoptees carry with us. Let them know that your love for them has not changed, and I know their love for you has not changed. So be supportive as possible. Don't take it the wrong way, and just try to understand that we all have a burning question that we would like to have answered. No matter how great of a life we had growing up, which mine was great, at some point I needed that question answered. I do not regret not looking any sooner because the fear of rejection is real. I lost my mom at 39. When she planted that seed, it took 2 years for it to grow. I would have never looked when my mother was alive. I would have never wanted to hurt her where she felt that what she did was inadequate or that she was not the mother that I needed or mother that I wanted. So I don't know if that was God's way of protecting me or if it just took me to mature before I was ready to actually deal with whatever I may have found. You know, I think fear took over. I don't know if I was ready to deal with it emotionally at 39 or at 40, the way I was at close to 60. So I think in my particular case, it was my maturity level that allowed me to look. In all reunions, after a while, the dust settles and you kind of settle back into the life that you had because we're a late reunion family, as I didn't look till I was 58. I won't say there's grief, but the dust is settling and everybody's kind of settling back into their normal lives. So there's an adjustment period, just like there was a high when we all met each other and everything was wonderful and marvelous. And, you know, it was like, hey, there's new Christmas and new friends. But, you know, everyone already had an established life. And so we found a way to mesh in each other's lives. So I wouldn't call it grief, but I think the emotional high, that roller coaster, is starting to settle. To use some of the adoption terms, the fog is starting to clear. And it's taken 3 years for that to happen. So no grief, but settling down. We're all settling into the relationships. We're on every social media platform. You name it, we're there. And on my Instagram bio, there's a link to every possible place that you can watch the movie. From the digital downloads and collector's item DVD on our website, to Apple TV, to Google Play, to Vudu, and July 1st will be on Tubi, which is actually a free service, so you can pick it up for free. Any place that you look, you can always start with just searching David Bynum and on a Google search, and it'll take you right to it. Or you can hit From a Place of Love film, and it'll take you to anything. The movie's gaining good traction, and we're starting to be known, so once you hit any search button for it, it'll pop up. Adoption is many things to many people. I think adoption depends on how you were raised, the situation you were raised in, how well you adjusted, because we've all heard the stories of where there haven't been great adoptions, and we've heard stories where there have been. So I think given the situation, given everything, adoption can be a good thing. But I think if mishandled or not in the situation, I think adoption can scar you for life. So as an adult now, after having my own children and now grandchildren, the second generation of my offspring, I can look back at my life and be thankful. A lot of adoptees hate to use the word grateful. I'm grateful my life turned out the way it is, but I'm thankful that my parents did the job they did. So I have an appreciation more so as an adult for the life that I had and the sacrifices that were made on everyone's behalf. Because my biological mother, I know, suffered and went through heck to carry me and then to give me up for a better life. So I have a fonder appreciation of that. I have an appreciation of my adoptive parents, the way they raised me, and the life that I ultimately lived. So as an adult, I think I have a greater appreciation for the times and the things that we went through through my adoption.